Hi, I'm Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to BoxBox F1 Pod. Today we're prepping for the 2024 season with a thoroughly biased but extremely accurate overview of who's who in the paddock. I'm going to cover all the key players, including owners, principals, and drivers. So if you're fresh from season 6 of Drive to Survive or just like want a refresher before heading into the new season, this episode's all about getting to know the teams, understanding key relationships, and recognizing all of the BNOTs, aka big names on track that we need to look out for in the upcoming season. We'll also do a quick rundown of the schedule for the year, review any exciting changes to car designs, and make predictions. So without further ado, let's get to know the 2024 roster. Okay, I'm going to kick things off with a quick rundown of the schedule and basic structures of an F1 weekend. So if you're familiar, go ahead and skip ahead to the who's who part in about, hopefully quick, a few minutes. Anyway, the 2024 calendar has a record-breaking 24 races with 2 mid-season breaks, 4 double headers, 2 triple headers, and the return of the Chinese Grand Prix. So a typical race weekend is usually media day on Thursdays, practice 1, practice 2 on Fridays, practice 3, and then qualifying on Saturday, and the race on Sunday. There are exceptions to this schedule. For example, the first 2 races this year are going to be on a Saturday instead of a Sunday. And I was a little confused about this for a while, but basically the reason for it is because Ramadan starts on the Sunday of the second race weekend, I think in Saudi Arabia. And in order to accommodate for that, the race will be held on Saturday so that the country and any religious Muslim people can adhere to Ramadan on Sunday. However, there are regulations in place that require at least 1 week between races, which means that the Bahrain Grand Prix has to also be pushed back to a Saturday. After that, it goes Australia, Japan, and China, which if you're in America, particularly the West Coast like me, all of those will also be on a Saturday, but those are expected to be on a Saturday because of the time difference. But basically the first 6 races of the year are going to be on a Saturday instead of a Sunday, so my schedule is all woo in my head. Also, if you're coming from DTS, there's a new addition as of late for a race weekend that I don't really cover, and that's the sprint race. It's basically like a mini race that allows some drivers to get extra points and also adds a little fun to the race weekend on days that are usually kind of quiet, Friday, Saturday. And it's basically like a 30-minute sprint, a specific number of laps, and they have a chance to score some extra points. So if you've been around for a while, I think it's the 3rd year they're doing this. Drivers range from indifferent to just straight up disliking it. So what they're doing this year that I actually quite like is that they are going to be having the sprint shootout and the sprint on a Friday, qualifying on a Saturday, and the race on Sunday. I think this makes a lot more sense structurally. We'll see how it actually goes. The point system, however, I think is going to be pretty much the same. So the top 8 get points. First place gets 8 points, and then down a point for every driver, and the 8th one gets 1. There are 6 sprint races this year: Brazil, Austria, Austin, Qatar, China, and Miami. Moving on from sprint races, there are a couple of other fun things to note about a race weekend. On Sundays before the race, Brundle, who is one of the Sky pundits, does a grid walk where he basically accosts anyone that comes in his path. There are always very hilarious run-ins with celebrities that range from incredible to incredibly awkward. There was an exceptional one last year with Machine Gun Kelly, and I also dug one up from the early 2000s that I talked about on a previous episode with Ozzy Osbourne. Total chaos. Insane. Anyways, that's not really race related, but if you want to tune in about 30 minutes before the start of the race, you can catch his grid walk, and it's usually pretty hilarious to watch. And I guess that would be a good segue into some important names you should know, aka BNOTs, or I guess these are more BNOPs, big names in the paddock that are not necessarily team associated, so it's not going to be covered in this next segment, but I feel like you should know because I talk about them quite a bit. Martin Brundle and David Croft, aka Crofty, are Sky News commentators. They're the main 2 commentators that cover the races every weekend, and they're the voices that you're going to be the most familiar with. Martin Garrix, that's a rogue one, I know. He is an international DJ and also an F1 ho. He is best friends with literally half the grid. Max, Lando, Daniel, he's always hanging out with another one. There's like an ongoing joke that he collects F1 drivers like Infinity Stones. You will see him pop up a lot, like a lot. And then there's Stephen Domenicali, who is the president of F1, and Mohammed Ben Soliem, who is the president of the FIA, two separate organizations. Sorry, quick note back on Martin Garrix. He is not the only DJ that like flirts his way around the paddock. There's quite a few that like make their way around. He's just the most consistent one and the most persistent one, I would say. Okay, and with that, let's get into the who's who of the paddock. I'll be going through this in Constructors' Championship order from last year. And for those of you who don't know, this is how the actual paddock is arranged. So if you win, you're first in line in the paddock when you enter. And the worse you do, the further along you go. And it's pretty much like a super tragic walk of shame. So like Haas has to literally walk through the entire paddock to get to their garage. And it's pretty sad. I would also like to preface this entire episode with the fact that unfortunately, I tend to love everyone. And while I like to think I'm really sassy and have like really hot takes, and I do frequently throw out unnecessarily hot takes out there, I have no follow through and will usually retract them within like 3 to 5 business days. A great example of this, unfortunately, is caught on video forever. But my friend Dias, who always does the Silverstone episode with me, I went on a giant rant during that episode about how Oscar has no riz, he has no personality. And Dias was like, please, literally like a year from now, you're going to be like saying, Oscar has the most riz. Less than 2 weeks later, I was like, you know who I think has a great personality? Oscar. So I love Oscar now, but I just like to say that I come in hot and then I end up loving them all, which is unfortunate for me. I like to think I'm a little bit more divisive than that, but I'm not. I basically end up rooting for them all, which actually makes it a very difficult watching situation to be in because I want everyone to win and they just can't all win. I also want to know that there are a lot of people on an F1 team. I will obviously not be going through all of them. It'll be mostly the front-facing people, so either the owner, the team principal, and the drivers. Occasionally I will like stray towards a couple of reserve drivers or like a technical director. But in general, I stick to like those 4 personalities that you're most likely to see week in, week out. Anyways, let's kick it off with Red Bull. So Red Bull, the team, pretty much has the exact same reputation as the drink. They have wings and they are aggressive. They partnered with Honda recently, not recently, in the last few years, which I've loved because Honda's just great. They bring a lot to the paddock, including Japanese food. But they are helping them produce the engine. Unfortunately, they will be gone from Red Bull. I believe they'll be joining Aston Martin in 2026. But Ford will become the technical partner of Red Bull come 2026 and be producing their engines from there on out. Red Bull had a bit of a winning streak with Seb Vettel between 2010 and 2013, and then there was just a really bad period for a while. Then they got Max Verstappen, and they started doing better and better, and then in 2021, they won the driver championship with Max under a very controversial situation. They also won again in 2022. Did I say too many twos? 2022. But by like a mile, both constructors and drivers. Not controversial that time, potentially slightly boring, but they won. In 2023, they won every race except for one. I believe Christian said that made it 94.3 winning rate or something like that. They literally set record after record after record. Most races won, most laps led, most something else. It was just always a new record that they were breaking. Max, I think, broke several of his own records within 1 year. So that was crazy. So it was a glorious year for Red Bull. It was a masterclass in leading a team from Christian, driving from Max, from engineering and Adrian Newey. But it also made for a slightly boring year for everyone else. This year, we're hoping for things to be spiced up a bit, but at testing, Max at the fastest time by over a second. He was obviously sandbagging, aka going slower on purpose. which means that's not a great omen for the future. There was a shot of Adrian Newey, the technical director, or not Adrian Newey, of GP, who is Max's race engineer, just like grinning broadly, like not knowing he was being filmed after Max set that lap in testing, and just not great for the rest of the grid is what it's looking like. But testing doesn't mean anything. We've seen some wild things happen to testing that just never pan out throughout the year. So we'll see. This year's car is interesting. We've seen flashes of it at testing, and we saw it at the car launch, although of course they don't show the whole thing at the car launch so that people can't get any crazy ideas. And it seemed that most of the grid went for emulating the RB19, the Red Bull from last year that won every race basically. And it seemed like Red Bull was like, let's be wild. And Adrian Newey basically, it seems, has taken the design of the Mercedes from last year that sucked. And he was like, anything you can do, I can do better. And it looks like he did do it better. He basically made their car work. All right, let's move on to the team principal, Christian Horner. I like to call him Mr. Ginger Spice. He has a lot of nicknames. He has Karen Horner because he likes to complain a lot. Lately it's been Horny Horner, or Horny Spice. I can't remember which one it was, but, because of the allegations that I'll get into in a second. Lots of nicknames, but Christian Horner comes with an adorable ginger family, including Ginger Spice of Spice Girls fame. He lives in a very posh country estate with Ginger Spice and their cute little ginger children. And they have donkeys and chickens. And this year, DTS really played up his Britishness, especially because they televised the annual Red Bull charity shooting that happens on his estate. Lots of tweed, lots of Barber the jacket, lots of boots. It's very British, very, very, very British. Christian is very petty and he's very sassy. I think a lot of the principals are really, but Christian is more like open about it. He's got this twinkle in his eye that always makes it feel like he's telling a joke, but he literally, I like to say that there's no hill that Christian Horner will not die on. He loves an argument. As of late, we haven't been able to experience it as much because they've just been on this winning streak and there's really been nothing for him to complain about. But when Christian gets riled up, whew, like one of my favorite things that he did was when people were booing Red Bull for going over the cost cap, he was like, this is not okay. The children of our engineers are being bullied on the playground because we went over the cost cap. He's very dramatic. It's excellent. I like to describe him as having like real housewives energy. Like he would always be center Pirelli tire for sure because he brings the drama every time. He's fully ride or die for Max. Max is his life, his soul. And I think that might look wild considering we've seen how others have suffered because of his love and commitment to Max. We've seen him recycle driver after driver after driver because no one could live up to Max. However, I do think from Max's perspective, it's great for him to have a father figure that loves and cares for him and shows him affection. However, we do need to talk about the dark side of Christian Horner. Up until today, finally, I've managed to record an episode after big news has happened. It always drops after I publish an episode, but luckily for me, we made it. So in the last few weeks, Christian Horner has been under investigation for inappropriate behavior. The nature of this inappropriate behavior has been very vague. First, it was basically he's very aggressive and angry behind the scenes and runs like a tight ship, but like in a bad way. Then it became like sexually inappropriate behavior towards a specific female coworker. Then it became he was aggressive towards the female coworker. I don't know what his actual inappropriate behavior was. I don't know if we're going to get more context in the coming days, but all we know is it was inappropriate and people were just surmising, basically. What we do know is that there was just like endless evidence, apparently, which is why it was also odd that it's taken weeks for this investigation to be conducted and for a verdict to come in if there was so much like evidence. I read that he paid her off like $650,000. I have not confirmed that, so please don't quote me on that. Maybe he didn't, maybe he did. Maybe he is a very aggressive person and he paid her off for it. Although we have like video evidence of Toto Wolff smashing tables and breaking things and being angry. We don't necessarily have Christian on tape doing that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening behind closed doors. Doesn't mean he's not being inappropriate in any capacity with his employees. But he was dismissed of all charges. Whether it's true or not, we'll never know, I suppose. Whether we'll get more clarity on what it was he was being investigated for, we don't know. All we do know is that Christian Horner still has a job, which is great news for Red Bull. If he is guilty, bad news. Anyway, next up, Max Verstappen. 26, Dutch, loves cats, huge gamer. I think one time he was live streaming until 1 a.m. before a race and then won the race. Also, he was like top 30 in the world for FIFA. So he's successful in many fields, not just on a track. He is leader of the Orange Army, which is the name for the Dutch fans who follow Max around like puppy dogs across Europe and sometimes across continents. He has now won 3 world championships in a row. Last year, he won every single race except for 3. Max is a contentious figure, not only because of his 2021 controversial win, but because I guess his personality is unusual. And I think there are a few things working against Max. One, he's Dutch. I'm always going to cite the Ted Lasso episode where the new Dutch teammate says something like super rude and one of the other guys goes, "Oh, don't worry, he's just Dutch." I think Max is very blunt and very straightforward, and a lot of the things that are lost in translation are really down to his extremely Dutch personality. Really, I think he's a sweetheart and actually quite funny. It just doesn't always translate. Number 2, he came in hot when he joined F1. He's still the youngest person to ever win a race, and when he joined, he didn't even have a driver's license yet. He also skipped F2 and went to F1 straight from F3. But yeah, he came in hot. He was a small, angry little boy. He had serious tantrums like all the time. And that aggression translated into his driving style on track. His fight with Lewis Hamilton, I think, really highlighted the difference in driving styles, and a lot of people hold that driving style against him, though I think over the years he's really honed it and is able to drive aggressively with finesse. Number 3, just Red Bull in general. Red Bull is an aggressive, in-your-face type of team, and the height of its rivalry, of Max's rivalry with Lewis, highlighted really the rivalry between Mercedes and Red Bull, and particularly Toto and Christian. And I think that sort of dynamic doesn't really lend itself to building a healthy relationship between opponents, basically. I think Lewis and Max a relationship between them was doomed from the start, just based on the environment they both find themselves in. Number 4, his dad. If you don't know Jos Verstappen, oh boy. He puts dance moms to shame. The most infamous story of Jos Verstappen was when Max didn't win a karting race, so Jos left him at a gas station on the way home in the pouring rain. Jos Verstappen has several allegations of violence against him. He's definitely a controversial figure, but he's clearly been instrumental in both Max's success, but also any psychological trauma he carries with him. That's like another thing about Max. He's the king of trauma dumping. He'll be having a casual conversation for like media content. Like there's this one clip where him and Daniel Ricciardo are doing some sort of media clip, and just in the middle he drops how his father like shoved a wrench into an engineer's thigh or something wild. And he just says it so casually and like giggles at the end. Like, he's very into trauma dumping and then giggling. Like, I don't think he's processful. Anyways, that's a lot of things working against one kid, but I love Max a lot. I know that's controversial. By the way, do not say you love Max in England. Learned that the hard way. They will skewer you. But I think it's fascinating what a divisive figure he is when all he does is really just exist. He minds his own business. He does what he wants. And I can appreciate that. And also, when you get him like I do, after all these years of observation, you will see that he really is just a sweet, sweet kid with unbelievable, raw, once-in-a-generation talent that he's really honing as he grows and matures. A couple other things to know about Max. Loves to Max-plain. So many clips of him just explaining people's ears off. And also there's this running joke about being on the Max Verstappen podcast every race weekend in the cool down room, because it's just him max-plaining to everyone or debriefing the race, and it's so fun to watch. And people have just called it the Max Verstappen podcast, and he hates it. He's like, I don't even like podcasts. Why is it a podcast? Love it. Also, this is not as relevant, but he's dating Kelly Piquet, who is a Brazilian model and daughter of 3-time F1 world champion Nelson Piquet. They live in Monaco together with her daughter Penelope, and actually that's a great aside about Max Verstappen. When he came into Red Bull, he took the seat of a driver named Daniel Kvyat. Who was Daniel Kvyat dating at the time? Kelly. And yes, Penelope is he is the baby daddy. So little Max Verstappen, who's so unassuming and no one pays attention to, stole the seat, stole the girl, didn't steal the child, but you get what I mean. Also, Penelope makes random appearances in Max's live streams. She was also at the paddle game that they just had in Bahrain with all the boys, and she was just there, and it was just very adorable. Max is very girl dad coded, and I love it. All right, D2 for Red Bull is Checo Perez. Checo is Mexican. He has an adorable family. His son loves cars. Checo's father is one of the most enthusiastic mans you will ever see in your life. His Instagram is just a bunch of terrible selfies with Checo looking very disgruntled in the background, and it's funny. The first couple years at Red Bull, Checo was literally the D2 of Red Bull's dreams. He was known as the Minister of Defense. He drove spectacularly, won races, got points, and defended Max like an animal, to quote Max. He was truly iconic. But at the end of 2022, we could see Checo entering his villain era, and that really came into fruition in the first few races of 2023. He was in full villain mode. He won 2 races, got too big for his boots, Icarused himself, and was like, just kept going around saying he was going to win the world championship, and then went on such a losing streak. Like, he barely made it into Q3 half the qualifyings. He did recover a bit towards the end, but now there's like added pressure because Red Bull is very openly saying that Daniel Ricciardo on AlphaTauri or Visa Cash App RB blah 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 is basically just waiting for Checo to fuck up and he will replace him. That's a lot of pressure on someone who already had a lot of pressure. So I mean, my fingers are crossed that Checo will have his mojo back this year, but like he's not really set up for success. So other key figures at Red Bull, Adrian Newey, he's the head engineer for Red Bull and basically a magician. He is imperative to their success. The car is him. He is the car. Dr. Helmut Marko, very creepy, villainy looking man, Austrian. He's like a consultant to the team. He's old and kind of racist and no one really likes him, but he's got an eye for talent. Speaking of eyes, he has a glass eye because he lost his eye in a racing incident like a million years ago because he's so old. Anyways, I guess Red Bull can't really get rid of him because he's old and probably tenured in some whatever tenure is equivalent to in racing teams. But also, he's just really good at his job. He really can spot talent like a mile away. But he is 80 though, so he's either going to retire, die, drop dead on the racing track. And then there's Liam Lawson, who is the reserve driver for both Red Bull and the Visa Cash App RB B2 team, whatever. If you watched Drive to Survive, you'll know that last year, you'll know he filled in for Daniel at AlphaTauri while Daniel's hand was recovering, and he did so good. He beat Yuki a few times, and this kid has so much riz, it's insane. His name is super hero coded, you know, like Liam Lawson definitely is like some sort of New Zealand Spider-Man on the side. Anyways, should Daniel replace Checo, Liam Lawson will be first in line, I think, to take the other seat next to Yuki. He's good, he's charming, and I don't see how much longer Red Bull will be able to resist giving him a permanent seat in F1. Last year, they won almost every single race. This year, they're probably going to win most races too. Hopefully, some other teams have really stepped up their game and they'll be able to compete with them. But I'm not holding my breath. All right, moving on to Mercedes. The team has been the dominant force in F1 for the better part of a decade. They won the Drivers' Championship 7 times, the Constructors' Championship 8 times. They finally broke their Constructors' streak in 2022, and obviously the Drivers' streak in 2021. So the vibe of Mercedes has changed a lot since they lost to Red Bull in 2021. I feel like they got a bit complacent during their winning streak, and it for sure is a very difficult shift to go from winning all the time to just losing. especially when they felt like they were robbed of the championship and then suddenly they can't produce a good car in this new era, and it's just like a struggle. The morale of the team is definitely down. And I think both Lewis and Toto, who I'll talk about in a second, are really struggling the most with this, and it's been difficult to watch. It takes time to adjust to not winning, I think, and they're taking their time. This year is going to be interesting, as I will continue to mention, because Lewis's move to Ferrari is really going to shift the team's dynamic. The team was basically built around Lewis. He is Mercedes, and now there's no way to corroborate why he left, because we're basically just going off of rumors here. But one of the reasons it seems that he was even considering a move was because he asked Mercedes to be a brand ambassador for the next 10 years after he leaves. And they said no. Like, I don't think Mercedes realizes that their fans, half of their fan base, goes with Lewis. Where Lewis goes, they go. So not making him a brand ambassador is a wild decision. Also, it seems that in addition to that, Lewis feels like he's not supported by the team or trusted by the team. In DTS, he mentioned that in 2022, he mentioned to them, or really tried to emphasize, that the car sucked and he had ideas on how to fix it. And they're like, we know what we're doing, leave us alone. And then in 2023, they were like, you were right, oops. And then there's also the rumors that Lewis took one look at the 2024 car and was like, I'm out of here. Because apparently it's shit again. It's all that they can't seem to build a car anymore. I don't know. This new era like really fucked them. One of the interesting things that was said on DTS, the episode aged really poorly because it was all about how Lewis might leave. And then he ended up signing a contract, and everyone's like, Lewis will never leave Mercedes. And now he's left Mercedes. But George was basically saying like the thought of Lewis leaving Mercedes is kind of bad for the team because it implies that he has lost faith in the team, and that Lewis's faith in the team is like what is the glue. And that's where they're at now. So that's stressful. Another thing that's very big this year is waiting to find out who's going to be replacing Lewis at Mercedes, who will be driving alongside George. I was really hoping for Alex. It doesn't look like that's going to happen now. So we'll see. Another thing to note about Mercedes, like as the team's personality per se, is they kind of annoy me because they're very PR-y, very structured. They like stir the pot but pretend like they're higher than thou and like they're not stirring the pot, and it really annoys me. But it seems like that's going to be different now. They all seem to like not give a fuck anymore. So we'll see what's going to be happening this year. All right, moving on to the people. The team principal / part owner is Toto Wolff. How do you find the word that means Maria? How do you describe a man like Toto Wolff? He is a man. He's tall, he's gorgeous, he's intelligent, he's like 6'5", he's Austrian, like Maria. Whoa. He is CEO, he owns 30%, and he is team principal of Mercedes. Toto's wife is named Susie Wolff, and she is amazing. She is the managing director of F1 Academy, and she's doing amazing things with it. Like, they just announced that Charlotte Tilbury is the main sponsor of one of the cars, and I'm obsessed. It's a Charlotte Tilbury car. Like, how cool is that? Also, they have a son named Jack Wolff, and he's adorable, the sweetest kid. Also loved Lewis, so how's his little heart doing? So sad. Toto came into a team on a trajectory to win, and he won over and over and over and over, and now he's not winning, and he seems to really struggle with getting back on his feet. We've seen him lose his composure several times, like that DTS scene with Christian, where Christian's like, change your fucking car. And then Toto's like, no, you change your fucking car. I have it printed out. Blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I think his behavior this year is going to be really telling. I think he's going to really struggle, unfortunately. And how he leads a team where his friend, his all-star, his rock, his everything has betrayed him is going to be very interesting. Also, there are rumors about Toto, and it's that he may have been the person to leak the Lewis information to the media, which is wild. Everyone knew it was a leak because obviously it was way too early for Lewis to announce something like that. And it was also like the day after he told the team and told Toto, and clearly Toto would be upset, and it checks out, and it'd be super sneaky, but I kind of love it. This is the stuff that I love in F1, just like the sneaky backhand. Oh, so great. I hope he did leak it, honestly. All right, D1, Lewis Hamilton. He is a Sir, so Sir Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion, 8-time if you ask my friend Dias, and many other people in the world, but legally and officially, he is a 7-time world champion. He's definitely the most famous driver at the moment. He's making his way into fashion and pop culture in a different way than everyone else on the grid is. And also, if there was ever any proof that he is bigger than the sport, bigger than F1, it was when he moved to Ferrari and Ferrari stock just went up like crazy. He's a GOAT. He is a GOAT. He's one of the best drivers to ever live, to ever be in the future. He's overcome a lot of hardships and obstacles and is using his position to bring more diversity and opportunity to women and people of color in the sport, both on the track and behind the scenes. And I think that's an incredible feat. I do get a bit annoyed with Lewis when he doesn't participate in the fun media stuff like Secret Santa. And he's just like walking around going #peaceful, #grateful. And I don't know if it's because he feels like he's above it all or if he just doesn't feel connected with the rest of the grid. He's not really friends with everyone. And like, I just feel like he has this sort of like out of reach vibe, like on a pedestal. Lewis is just sort of like the celebrity figure in like the same way, like I feel like Harry Styles isn't a real person, if that makes sense. He also loves music. He was on a track with Christina Aguilera, which is crazy. He is a vegan, which if you've listened to my previous episodes, you will know that this is my biggest concern with him moving to Ferrari. But I do think we'll see a different side to Lewis this year. He no longer gives a fuck. Also, move to Ferrari means he's sick of shit. And also, going to Ferrari means like the end of his career is looming. So I think he'll have a very different vibe to him, and I'm kind of excited, and I hope it gives him a bit more personality when he just doesn't give a shit. Says what he thinks, does what he wants. D2, George Russell. God, how do I describe George Russell? Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. Lewis is 40. Lewis is old. Okay, so how do I describe George Russell? He's British, he's 26, always gives off a bit of a keen, eager beaver vibe. Super company man through and through, very loyal to Toto, but I also thought Lewis was loyal to Toto. No, George is loyal in a different way, in a very eager kind of way. He, most importantly, is a walking meme, and specifically, unintentionally so. He doesn't set out to be a walking meme, and yet he is. He unknowingly launched a trend online that was basically George Russell is the type of guy who, and it basically just a lot of lame things attached to the end of the sentence. Last year he posed in the F1 intro where his like this. And it just became the meme of the century. It will never die. And those are just the big ones. Like I could do an entire episode on the George Russell memes that he has produced without intending it. Another important thing there's also a rumor that he is a robot, and that has not been disproven yet. So still looking out for whether that's true or not. And something to back that up is he loves PowerPoints. If you have not yet, watch 2019 F1 rookie video on YouTube with him, Alex Albon, and Lando Norris. And they're basically competing over who's the best rookie, and they do presentations to demonstrate it. Alex does a rap. Lando, he made a video. And George Russell made a PowerPoint. Also, apparently, George made a PowerPoint to convince Toto Wolff to let him enter the Mercedes Junior program. And if that doesn't tell you all you need to know about George Russell, I don't know what is. On another important note, George is a very good driver, but he also seems to panic a lot, and that panic tends to lead to crashes. I almost feel like some of the guys are like, maybe if we just put like a little pressure on him, he'll just take himself out. And that's happened a lot last year. I might be selling George short because he is a great driver, and maybe that won't happen this year, but that did happen quite a few times last year, so we shall see. And finally, the most impressive thing about George is his girlfriend, Carmen, one of my favorite wags on the grid. She's Spanish, works in London in finance, has a real job. Love her paddock fits. I also love when she sort of collaborates with George and they're like matchy, not matchy type of outfits. They look so good together. Big fan. Such couple goals. Also, George's best friend is Alex Albon on the grid, followed probably by Lando. Despite all odds, Mercedes finished second in 2023, even though they never won a race, though no one did, so I guess that's not relevant. They were neck and neck with Ferrari, though, like literally up until the checkered flag of the final race. So I guess this year we're basically gonna see who's managed to build the best car and make the best improvements and go from there. All right, moving on. Ferrari. Oh, Ferrari. My annual disclaimer before I dive in. I respect Ferrari, I respect its history, and what I'm about to say does not contradict that respect, even though it might sound that way. However, Ferrari strategists suck ass. Like, they're bad. Like, they're really, really bad. Also, they're all terrible communicators. Like, half of the problems are because they ignore Charles and Carlos, or give them the wrong information, or give them one thing and then change their minds and give them something else. And it's also dumb. It's all avoidable, and they just don't avoid it. And like, it needs to change. Also important to note, the Ferrari team is always dressed in head to toe red, like exclusively, even the belts, the socks, I would bet the underwear is. I will say that Fred Vasseur sort of challenges that standard and wears a lot of other Ferrari merch that's not red, and I respect that. Lastly, even though I've talked about it already, Ferrari made a completely unexpected move in the last few weeks and paid $100 million for Lewis Hamilton. First of all, where did that money come from? Second of all, one of my favorite stipulations of his contract is that they will back all of his diversity initiatives, which I love. But I will say the most diverse thing about Ferrari is Fred Vasseur, who is French. So that will be a steep learning curve for them, but I appreciate them accepting the undertaking. There's other things that I think they will struggle with more. For example, accepting vegan cheese. So here's hoping Lewis can push Ferrari into the future. All right, so let's get into the current team. Fred Vasseur. Fred Vasseur is French, which perhaps might be the most important personality trait he possesses. A French man leading an Italian team, aka the most Italian thing to ever exist on the whole history of the planet, is bold. Fred Vasseur is also quirky. There's a compilation of all the people trying to describe Fred in this latest season of DTS, and it's all just like, interesting, quirky, has a personality. He's like, he can be very serious. He looks pretty serious, and he can be very sly, as we know now with the Lewis Hamilton move. But he also has this like very jolly, but like a French version of jolly like existence. I don't know how else to explain it. He's a prankster. He's low-key hilarious. He tried to dunk Carlos's head into his own birthday cake. He asked Carlos if he's single during a scene in DTS last year. He's just a fun guy. Also, it turns out he helped launch like half of the careers on the grid, including Lewis Hamilton, which brings us to his boldest move thus far at Ferrari, and that is bringing Lewis Hamilton on. It's bold. It's also a little sad because it's like kind of betraying Carlos. On one hand, I understand if you have the opportunity to snag the best, most important F1 driver ever, you would. But like, Carlos gave them a win. He was consistent. He's smart. He's just so good, and it's just so sad to see. I guess the one consolation is I'm pretty sure Lewis is the only driver on the grid that would ever challenge Carlos's place on that team, which says a lot. Another thing to note about Fred is that he was best friends with Toto for 25 years. He was at his wedding. Toto told a story about how Fred ate the plastic flowers at his wedding. What a Fred thing to do. So I wonder if this was like a very like et tu brute moment for Toto. Like, he was stabbed twice in the back, first by Lewis and then by his best friend Fred. It's sad. Poor Toto. All right, Charles Leclerc. Oh my God, what is there to say about Charles Leclerc? Charles is basically synonymous with Ferrari. Like, Charles is Ferrari. There is no alternative. He can't escape. I don't think he wants to escape. He is Ferrari. He's 26. He's from Monaco. And I think the best way to describe Charles is he's a Disney princess. He's physically flawless. Purely from an objective standpoint, he is flawless. He's charming. He's charismatic. A little dumb, but in an endearing way. Not really dumb. Like, he's very smart. He speaks 5 languages. He just seems a little like head in the clouds sometimes. Like, he's not really like present. He's very smart. I'm not saying he's not smart. But also Charles's life is kind of littered with tragedy. So much tragedy. His father died a couple weeks before he made it into Ferrari. And it was their dream together. And before his father died, he told him that he already became a Ferrari driver. His dad died happy. His mother was furious that he lied to his father on his deathbed. And then a few weeks later, he got the seat. And that's why I feel like he's never going to leave. He's never leaving Ferrari. There's this connection there, and I don't think he feels like he could ever, unless he will die there, or he will just wait until they fire him. Another tragic story is that his godfather, Jules Bianchi, also an F1 driver, died at a Grand Prix. So much tragedy in Charles' life. He has a beautiful family. His mother, his older brother Lorenzo, who is his manager, and a younger brother named Arthur, who's an F2 and also beautiful. building a name for himself. Also, Charles's full name is Charles Marc Hervé Percival Leclerc, which is amusing. Anyway, all of this tragedy sort of follows him on track. He always seems to have bad luck, and like on one hand, can I name all the times it was his fault? It was usually just bad luck or Ferrari's fault. And I like to dub this series of unfortunate events the curse of the Monegasque prince. And it just follows him around. Currently, I'm unsure. I have not decided if Lewis joining Ferrari is a continuation of this curse, because what does that mean for Charles? They built the whole team around him. He's their golden boy. What does Lewis Hamilton joining the team mean for him? Anyway, love Charles, dying for him to have some success, to end the streak of bad luck. All right, moving on to Carlos Sainz, aka Carlos Chili, smooth operator Sainz. He is Spanish, he is 29. I love Carlos. He's funny, he's feisty, he loves food. Carlos is one of my favorite drivers on the grid, and he's just so smart. I think that's why I love him the most, and I think that's really translated at the Singapore Grand Prix when he won, not just by being fast. I wouldn't say that he was necessarily the fastest car there, but by being smart. Like, he strategized on his own and pulled a victory, and it was incredible to watch. I also would like to point out that Carlos's father is named Carlos, and he also has a cousin named Carlos, but he goes by Caco, so there's not as much confusion. I'm very upset that Carlos has lost a seat at Ferrari. I'm praying, hoping, physically think it's impossible for him not to get a seat in 2025 because he's just too good. Where he goes, unclear. Right now it's looking like Audi once they join the grid, but we don't know. I love him, and I need him to stay. Last year, Ferrari finished third, but they were very close to finishing second. And again, just like Mercedes, it really depends on luck, their communication skills, and how much Carlos and Charles choose to listen to the engineers, because they can be a lot more successful if they just ignore them. All right, moving on to McLaren. McLaren is a pretty iconic team. The OG McLaren, Bruce McLaren, is Bay. Their headquarters are beautiful, beautiful. Movies have been filmed there. Most notably, aka the one I've seen, Hobbs and Shaw. Looks amazing. I was a big McLaren girl for a while. I fell out with them a bit last year. I'm slowly starting to come back, but I'm still kind of hesitant, and it really all stems to Zak Brown. So Zak Brown is the owner. I loved Zak Brown for years. When this podcast began, we called him the Santa F1, lovingly joked how he has to drive a Land Rover instead of an actual McLaren because he can't fit in one. He seems so fatherly and kind and wholesome, and he really does collect cute, youthful, fast driving boys like little elves. But after how he handled the whole Daniel Ricciardo thing, I've really fallen out with him. And I've started to see him for the sneaky frat bro that he actually is. And I used to think he was like my favorite American that was there. He was the only one. But now I'm starting to realize he's starting to remind me why I feel like F1 should remain a non-American sport. And I thought that once the Daniel pain subsided, I would learn to love again. But it's just, he just keeps annoying me. He was so rude to Otmar, although it kind of seems like Otmar deserves it. No one likes Otmar. But also, I don't know, the way he handles conflict, the way he tattles on people, like he loves an open letter. And like, I don't know, the way he complains is just so American and obnoxious. And I can't. I'm trying to move past it because I want to love him, but it's a work in progress. Sorry, total side note. Did anyone watch the movie, I think it was called The Other Zoe, and it had that guy from The Outer Banks in it? His character in that film was named Zach McLaren. Like, tell me the writer was not a Drive to Survive fan. Just tell me. Zach McLaren, you just came up with that? Anyway. The team principal is actually not Zak Brown, Andrea Stella, who is Italian, and he used to be the performance engineer and a race engineer at Ferrari. I still don't know much about him, even though he's been here for a year, except that he likes red and orange. Also, McLaren replaced an Andreas with an Andrea, which is quite a move. He also doesn't seem to like the limelight very much, and Zak Brown takes most of the media public-facing duties. All right, D1. Lando Norris. Man, when I joined this fandom. I was such a Lando girly. He was a sweet kid who didn't eat anything with flavor, and he reminded me of the boys I went to uni with. But Lando is now like 25. Still doesn't eat anything with flavor. And he's kind of a dick. I'm like a little torn on him because on one hand I do like him a lot. He's fun. He's a gamer. He's like full on Gen Z. I have his bucket hat. But he just sometimes comes off a little spoiled and like a little mature and just like a little rude, which I think became far more evident when Daniel joined the team. And on one hand, the stuff he says is like honest, I guess, but it's still kind of rude. Anyways, I mix on Lando. But one personality trait that you should know about Lando is like his thing is hobbies. In 2022, after being teammates with Carlos, he took up golfing, and it was like his entire personality. Well, then he took up DJing, and that was an entire personality, but he's retired that now. He was traveling with like a DJ set on his private jet for a while. Then he picked up photography and started a Lando.jpg account, which was kind of amazing. And I really would like to refer to Lando as Lando.jpg from now on. He's cooled it on the hobbies now. He also mostly plays paddle with the boys as his hobby. And I'm really starting to come around to him again. He's still kind of douchey, but he is funny. And he does make a great pairing with Oscar. So I am a hesitant Lando fan. Now, Oscar Piastri. When I tell you I was shocked that this man had a personality, it took a good half a season because he's kind of quiet. Also, he's Australian. Does not give off Australian vibes. It looks like he will literally melt in the sun. Not entirely sure how he copes in the country of Australia, continent of Australia. But actually, once you get to know him, like I have, Oscar is adorable and funny, and you just kind of want to hug him all the time. He's fast. His sprint was epic last year. He won. Should have said that. I love him a lot. And if you really want to see his personality shine, follow him on Twitter. Like when the Lewis thing came out, he tweeted, was on a run. Did I miss anything? Classic Oscar bants. And if you really want to get some of that Piastri, like classic Piastri humor, you must follow his mother too. Twitter humor is definitely genetic when it comes to the Piastri family. Last year they sucked for the first half of the year, and then they dominated in the second half. And let's hope they channel the second half of the year and continue to dominate and really challenge Mercedes and Ferrari and maybe even Red Bull. All right, moving on to Aston Martin. Aston Martin used to be Racing Point, then Lawrence Stroll bought it, made it into Aston Martin, and made his 5-year plan to become the best number one car on the grid. And the first half of last year, we were like, oh my God, is he actually doing it? But then they kind of started struggling. But I do have full faith in Lawrence, so I have no doubt that there will be a championship fighting car at Aston Martin by the time those 5 years are up. And I think we're in year 3, potentially coming on to 4. So we will see. Okay, so the owner of Aston Martin is Lawrence Stroll. For the record, Lawrence Stroll has never been shown in normal speed on Drive to Survive. He's always walking in slow motion, but doing business at like warp speed. And I think that kind of branding really worked on me personally. I'm obsessed with Business Lawrence as this like, did I say Business Lawrence? I'm obsessed with Lawrence Stroll as like this business magnate and like villainesque figure in the paddock. I think that kind of character is very necessary. And I actually think he's very kind, but also kind of villainy. And I do have to add that this latest season of Drive to Survive, when they showed him at that like super rich person party, and everything was like in this green light, which I know is because of Aston Martin, but it just made it look evil. And he's like walking in slow-mo from the yacht, and you can hear the frantic servers being like, fuck, he's coming. Get it ready for Lawrence. Get it ready for Lawrence. And it was just very Succession meets James Bond villain, and I loved it. Another big thing to note about Lawrence Stroll is he loves his kids like nothing else. We saw that a lot this season of Drive to Survive. Like when you don't see that behind the scenes, you can't really tell where everything is stemming from, but his love for Lance is deep and strong. And I actually think that might be part of the problem, because I think it puts a lot of pressure on poor little Lance. Not in the way that I personally thought it was, like a Succession-y, like Kendall needing to appease his father or make his father proud. But like this kind of love is like his father loves him so much, so he doesn't want to let him down. It's a very different sort of need to make proud. Anyways, great father. He is a billionaire. Everyone hates him because he's a billionaire, but I love him. Love him a lot. What a character to have around. We're so lucky. All right, the team principal is Mike Crack, and all I've got to say is his name is Mike Crack, which if you say in the same speed that I am, you are saying my crack. Mike Crack. Mike Crack. Mike Crack. Okay, D1, Fernando Alonso. I put him as D1 because it's Fernando Alonso. I will start my introduction to Fernando Alonso with my favorite Fernando Alonso quote, which was from Drive to Survive a season ago, not the latest one. We are very selfish, drivers in general, but in Formula One, there always has to be good characters and bad ones, heroes and anti-heroes. So me, I'm on the dark side. Love that. Love that. Fernando's one of the best drivers ever, even though he only has 2 world championships under his belt, and he actually hasn't won a race in years. When he dominated in the first part of last season, I literally couldn't sit down in my seat. Like, he's so fun to watch when he drives. He's exciting, he's smart and aggressive, like all at the same time. He's got all the best characteristics of a driver in one. And like, honestly, I'm just gonna put it to bad luck that he doesn't have the accolades to match his obvious skills. He's also old as fuck. He's 42 and he's still got it. He's competing with people 20 years younger than him and he's holding his own. He is incredible. He's also quite funny. He's very sassy. He does not give a fuck. He said he used to hate the media, but when he took his break from F1, he really grew to appreciate the media side of F1 as a fan. And so now that he's back, he really plays into all of that because he knows how important it is for the fans. And I love him so much for that. D2, Lance Stroll. So he's the son of Lawrence. He does give off like sort of rich kid, was never really socialized properly. And F1 is like my first experience in the real world type of vibes. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. He gets a very bad rap. He's a very sweet kid. I think he's a above average driver. I wouldn't say he's exceptional, but he's above average for sure. He's just very shy and reserved. Some people would say that he has a seat because of his father, which might be true, but I really think that's more down to him not wanting to be here than not deserving it. His big story last year was that he broke his hands and toe 2 weeks before the first race while cycling in Spain. He got surgery and still raced in Bahrain at the first race 2 weeks after the injury. That's insane. If you have been around for the last year, you would have heard my very long rant about how I don't understand. I don't know how many laws were broken to allow him to race in Bahrain. I think it's insane that it even happened. At the time, I kind of thought Lawrence might be forcing it, but after watching Drive to Survive and hearing Lance say that he can't let Lawrence down, like really broke my heart. And I think the reason he competed, the reason he was there was because he could not face letting the team down or letting his dad down after everything they worked for. He like kept mentioning, he was like, everyone worked so hard. We're in such a great place. How could I not be there? It's very sad. I'm still not convinced he wants to drive anymore, but he's sticking around, I think because his dad loves him and he wants his dad to love him. And he wants to do this with his dad because it makes his dad happy. And I could be wrong. This is total conjecture. I have nothing to back it up other than my opinion. But I hope he gets to live the life he wants soon. And if this is the life he wants to live, then he should keep living it. But I don't think it is. All right. Alpine. Alpine is French. Alpine used to be Renault and was headed by Cyril Abiteboul, and his absence is still felt today. And I will continue to say that every season because I miss Cyril a lot. Alpine is also randomly backed by a random collection of celebrities. Halfway through last year, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney of Wrexham fame invested in Alpine. Later that year, a group of athletes also invested in Alpine, and that included Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. Why Alpine? Mostly because none of them can pronounce it. If I hear Travis Kelce say Alpine one more time, I will die. And does that mean we'll be seeing him at a Grand Prix before the football season starts? That's exciting. Also, you know what would be iconic is if Taylor Swift bought a team. She could totally buy a team. Or an F1 Academy team. That's actually what she should do. She should buy an F1 Academy team, compete against Charlotte Tilbury. But I really guess that being French is Alpine's only like personality trait. They like lunch. They like looking down on other people. And now that they got rid of Otmar, they're really, really French. The owner of Alpine is Laurent Rossi. He said in the season of Drive to Survive, season 5, he said, "We have a French DNA. If you don't feel it, something is wrong." We definitely feel it. I don't know if I've just never paid attention to him, but I kind of like him a lot. He's very unproblematic, handsome, French man, just living his life. He probably loves a good lunch. I guess he is problematic though, because he did fire Otmar halfway through a race weekend last year, which is a wild move. But also Otmar was not it. Clearly, like, trust Lawrence's instinct. Lawrence fired him. There was a reason. No one else needs to pick him up. He's now living a very happy life in Michigan, and he posts a lot of selfies on Instagram that is like half of his head and like an entire background, and he's like this in the whole shot. Amazing content. So the team principal is Bruno Famine. This man is an engineer by training. He was FIA Director of Operations for the sporting branch in 2019. And then in 2022, he became the CEO in charge of engine development at Alpine. And now he serves as the Vice President of Alpine Motorsport and as a team principal. This man is interesting. The first time I saw him or noticed him in the season of Drive to Survive, the first thing he said is that he hates the spotlight, he hates the camera, and he just likes to operate in the shadows behind the scenes. And then we watch as like in a few months or like a couple minutes on Drive to Survive, he replaces Otmar as team principal of Alpine. And I don't know if it was the editing, but like I'm definitely suspicious at how heavily involved he was in Otmar's firing. Like, it really kind of seems like he arranged the whole thing. I do think part of the problem with Otmar, or that the team had with Otmar, is that besides being a weirdo and not good at his job, he also wasn't French, and that just is like crime number 1 for the French. And I just think they were all kind of offended by his presence. But anyway, Bruno is like such an unassuming man, but I think he's actually like secretly a conniving mastermind. Exhibit A is Otmar, and Exhibit B is that once he became team principal, he was like, the first thing I need to solve in my new role is this relationship between Pierre and Esteban. I will handle it. And then they show him going into the room with the two of them and then coming out, and he's like, I spoke to them. There will be no more problems. I have fixed the situation. And then there weren't any problems. And like Pierre said in an interview that this is the best his relationship with Esteban has been in 10 years. And like, what did he do to them in that room? Did he torture them? Did he threaten them? What could he have possibly said that has not been said to them before that is making them behave? Anyway, the man makes me nervous, but like, I guess this brings me back to another defining characteristic of this team is that they have 2 French drivers, Esteban and Pierre, which in theory is a perfect move. In practice, not so much. They hate each other, or they did, and Otmar was like, it takes a certain type of leadership style to manage 2 drivers that hate each other. It was not his leadership style, but it's clearly Bruno's leadership style, whatever he did. Torture them into submission. And also I was really hoping to get down to the real reason why they hate each other in this episode. In the season of Drive to Survive. And it actually just comes down to, they're like, he was mean to me when I was 10. He thinks he's faster than me, but he's not. And that's why they've hated each other for like a decade or more. It's dumb. It's just dumb. All right, Esteban Ocon. So Esteban is French, he's lanky, and he's 27. Not to be rude, but I genuinely forget that Esteban exists, and then I'll randomly remember because he does something cool on track, and then I promptly forget again. Esteban is very gangly. He's one of the few drivers on the grid who didn't come from money, which is cool. His father was just a mechanic. He's French, even though his name is Esteban, and that continues to throw me off. I feel like he's totally harmless and very sweet, but at the same time, he's never not had an issue with one of his teammates. So clearly there's something wrong and I'm not seeing it. And then there's Pierre Gasly, or Pierre Gasly, as Daniel Ricciardo says, and that's actually the only way to say Pierre's name. He's 28. He's also French. Pierre has this sort of like je ne sais quoi about him. He's just effortlessly cool. He's social media obsessed. Liked by Pierre Gasly became like this whole thing. I have a t-shirt from him. It's not an exaggeration because he literally liked every piece of F1 content I ever saw. Non-F1 content. It was still at the very top. It would say liked by Pierre Gasly. Every time. Pierre's best friend is Charles, followed closely by Yuki. His girlfriend is Kiki. Keep up. And she is stunning. She's Portuguese. She's stunning. And then another thing this season of Drive to Survive highlighted for me, I knew it. All the drivers love themselves a lot. And I knew Pierre particularly probably loves himself a lot. But this season of Drive to Survive really highlighted how much Pierre loves himself. He knows he's hot shit. I think at one point he was stand on this side. This is my good side. And then he has having a photo shoot on a rooftop and he's let me just snap some selfies. It's just, he's something. I love Pierre though. All right, moving on to Williams. Williams is a sister team of Mercedes. Williams drivers are often promoted to Mercedes, a la Nico Rosberg, Valtteri Bottas, and George Russell. I actually love Williams and I don't really know why. Actually, I think I do. It's the people. I love the people so much. So let's get into them. The team principal is James Vowles. Last year was his rookie year as team principal. He came from Mercedes. You probably best know him from Mercedes as the man who got on the radio and said, Valtteri, it's James. But in a British accent. I don't know why I gave a different accent. And that was when he told Valtteri to slow down so that Lewis could win the race. It was infamous. It's how James Vowles entered the F1 vernacular, and it's why I hated him for so long. And I don't know how I really got to the point where I'm deeply obsessed with him. If you told me 3 years ago that I would love him one day, I'd be like, please, this man. First of all, just to show the bands he has. Last year, he joined Instagram at the end of the season. And the caption was, Instagram, it's James. And Valtteri commented, James, it's Valtteri. Welcome to Instagram. Obsessed. Obsessed, I tell you. Social media banter is my number one love language. Not really. It's just my love language with F1. But I love how James Vowles explains things. It's so calm, collected, and smart, and easy to understand. If you don't get something in F1, go watch a video of James Vowles explaining it, and you'll get it immediately. It's just he should also record those Sleepy Time app things. His voice is just so soothing. I love James. Another thing that he's good at explaining, if you get a moment, find the video on the Williams social media pages of him explaining the concept of Alex Albon's pumpkin spice latte order dictating the result of the race, and how they all tried Alex Albon's pumpkin spice latte order to a T, and how James does not care how many races they win drinking it. He will not be drinking again. I also love how he treats his drivers. He gives them the time to grow and learn and protects their well-being first and foremost. I will forever remember how he treated Logan at the Qatar GP. What? At the Qatar GP, and it's just exceptional. We got some insights into his personality during this season of Drive to Survive that aren't necessarily translated over the broadcast. He is a health freak. Loves an acai bowl unless he's wearing a white shirt, then that's too dangerous. He does not drink caffeine unless he's feeling wild, and then he'll have a green tea with honey. He will say hello to every single human in the building when he enters the office. He also loves data, a lot. Data is life for James Vowles. He might be a walking Excel spreadsheet. But James Vowles has become my new favorite team principal, and I can't even fully back it up other than he seems utterly wholesome in every possible way and untainted by the shady, murky underbelly of F1. And I think it's lovely. D1 at Williams is Alex Albon. He's half British, half Thai. He races for Thailand. He's a good driver who gets a bad rap because when he was Max's D2 of Red Bull for 2 years, he struggled, as every D2 does. He even won Rookie of the Year in 2019, but it's hard to be young and unexperienced next to Max. It's even hard to be old and experienced next to Max, if Checo's any indication. He was reserve driver for Red Bull in 2021, which honestly was probably good for his mental health to have that break. And then he became a Williams driver in 2022, and he's got the resilience of a tank. He got appendicitis and missed one race, and then was back in the car the next race, and that race was Singapore, which is a crazy race to come back to after appendicitis. Insane. By the way, if you have the time and want to get into the rabbit hole of a conspiracy theory, there's a whole thing about how that douse of appendicitis launched like this series of events that have led to Lewis's move to Ferrari. It's a wild ride if you have the time. Anyway, Alex drove exceptionally well for Williams, and I think he like is a great leader for them to have and take them into the future. He's a bright one, and I'm so glad he's been given the chance to redeem himself after Red Bull, because Red Bull tries to build people up, but really they just tear people down. He's just impossible not to love. He's funny, he's quirky, he's smart, he's kind of awkward, he's so sassy, and his social media presence is unmatched. So sarcastic, like I can't. And one of his best assets, truly one of his best assets, is his girlfriend Lily, who's a professional golfer and elevates Alex in every possible way. She's pretty, she's cool, she's talented, she's funny. Them together is everything. Their social presence is everything. They go on double dates with George and Carmen frequently. They're each other's wags, which I love because it's just very equal. There was that post that Alex made like a year and a half ago of him on the green during one of Lily's tournaments holding a banana and being like, ready to support my wag. I love them. D2 is Logan Sargent, and Alex describes Logan's aesthetic as a discount superhero, and it kind of tracks. Honestly, Logan Sargent as a name sounds fake, and putting it together with the whole discount superhero thing, it kind of sounds like someone asked ChatGPT to create like an American race driver character who's like a junior Captain America that could be either a villain or a hero, and like they would generate Logan Sargent in face and name and everything. Unfortunately, Logan did not do great last year. Fortunately, Williams sees potential in him, and they recognize the learning curve that comes with becoming an F1 driver, and they're giving him another chance. No one believes they should do that, I think, except for me and James Vowles. I'm very, very happy. Also, Logan is another example of me changing my mind about someone. I was so annoyed about him at the beginning of last year, and now I have such a soft spot for him. He's just a little baby, and I want him to thrive. Like, I think the thing that made me really warm up to him, I warmed up to him before, but like made me cry for him, was at the Qatar Grand Prix when he was like passing out in the car and he was on the radio, and James was like, you have to come in, it's okay, your well-being comes first. And he's like, no, I can do it. And then he brought himself in, and he felt so guilty, and it just broke my heart. Logan is American. His family is billionaires. I think his uncle's like an oil tycoon and provides like oil or guns for the US military or something, just very casual. He doesn't seem to be home very often, which is sad. Like, he was asked about his favorite Thanksgiving dishes, and he like listed them all, and he's like, I actually haven't been home for Thanksgiving in years, so this is just like old memories. It was really sad. I love him a lot. I think he can drive. I think he's got talent, and I just want him to succeed, and I really hope that Alex and James can help him hone his talent and personality into results, you know? I just need that for him. So Williams finished last in 2022, and they finished 7th in 2023. So I have very high hopes for where they're headed. Okay, so next up is Visa Cash App RB Formula One team. Well, let's just take a moment of silence for the team formerly known as AlphaTauri. All right, so Visa Cash App RB Formula One team is the sister team to Red Bull, in case you couldn't tell by the RB and the giant bull in its logo. While this name is appalling, the best thing to happen with this change is that the drivers are no longer forced to wear AlphaTauri clothing. I was growing on it. I even bought my brother a shirt from there, but I could never shake the feeling that it gave a very post-apocalyptic school uniform type vibe. The new clothing partner is Hugo Boss, which is a step up for sure. There's definitely more variety, and there was already a picture of Daniel and Yuki both wearing Hugo, and they look cool. Yuki had managed to make AlphaTauri look cool, so I think he'll do great with Hugo. Anyway, the team is very unabashedly Red Bull's sister team. Christian describes it as a team that should be supplying Red Bull its drivers, though it hasn't really happened in a while, but that's theoretically the purpose of it. But they seem to be a lot closer siblings than some other siblings on the grid. Zach Brown has openly criticized the team's connection to Red Bull. I'm like, whatever, Zach. Write your open letters. No one cares. it's not like every single person in this grid isn't complicit in shady behavior, unless you're James Vowles, who is not complicit in anything ever. Zach just loves to bitch in the most American way possible, and it just irks me. At least be fun about your bitching. All right, so the team principal is named Laurent Mekies. He is French. He was with Ferrari from 2018 as sporting director before becoming deputy team principal, which is apparently a role, did not know. He was let go from Ferrari early last July, though I don't know why. I guess it's because he was planning on coming here and they were just like, you can go now. Anyway, he's here now. I don't know how he'll do or much about him other than he looks very tired all the time. And even though he took a sabbatical, he has come back looking just as tired as when he left. So the D1, and I say this because he's been here the longest out of both drivers, is Yuki Tsunoda, who is my absolute favorite human being on the entire planet. He is only 23. He's Japanese. He got a reputation when he came for being super angry and unpredictable. He's a massive gamer, which I think contributed to it because I think he learned English originally from gaming. And so when he arrived, he was literally just saying fuck shit all the time because he thought it was just like normal words. It also felt like he was speaking to his engineers. Like everyone's like, he's being so mean and aggressive to his engineers. But I feel like he was just talking to them the way he talks to people he competes with online. In 2022, there were definitely improvements to his attitude and maturity, particularly his attitude towards working out, which he's previously said he would rather do literally anything besides exercise. It's the worst thing that could possibly happen to him when he has to exercise. I think Pierre's mentorship when they were teammates helped a lot, and Pierre's departure freaked him out, and he's like really tried to step up in Pierre's absence. Once Pierre left, we saw Yuki grow so much. He started taking his training seriously. And I think a lot of that can actually be credited to his trainer, who realized that the best way to get Yuki to do anything is to bribe him with food, which is, by the way, my absolute favorite part about Yuki. He loves food. He lives for food. He loves eating it. He loves cooking it. He loves talking about it. My dream collab is Yuki, honestly. But my favorite clip to reference is this compilation of all the drivers saying what their dream was. And like all of them say, to win a world championship, to win a world championship, to win a world championship. And then Yuki goes, to open a restaurant. Iconic. Max once said that if he ate like Yuki, he'd have to be rolled out on track. He loves food. But speaking of being rolled out on track, I would love to big up Yuki and say that he has graduated this year from an extra small to a small. So all that training is paying off. A heartwarming moment about Yuki is that the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix was canceled last year due to floods, and the AlphaTauri headquarters are in Emilia-Romagna. So the whole week when the race was supposed to be happening until the next race, he was helping around the area, cleaning up and like helping with any physical relief from the floods. There were pictures of him like mopping the streets and like cleaning up trash, and it was just very wholesome. One thing to keep in mind about Yuki is that he's lost a lot of people in the last couple of years. He lost Pierre, he lost Nick, he lost Daniel, then he got Logan, then he lost Logan, then he got Daniel again. He's gone through a lot. But also Yuki's seat, while I think he's really earned his spot at AlphaTauri or Visa Cash App, RB, whatever. His seat is also very much because Honda is a technical partner, and it was very important for them to have a Japanese driver on the grid. And I think while that might have played a role in his original hiring, I think he's certainly earned his place now, but there is the potential for his seat to be under threat as Honda's partnership with Red Bull comes to an end. However, Honda will be moving on to Aston Martin, so whether that means that Yuki stays with RB or moves on to Aston Martin, we don't know. I don't know if he goes where Honda goes or does what he wants. I don't know how it works. I also don't know who he would replace, because like, how do you replace Fernando Alonso with Yuki Tsunoda? But also, how is Lawrence going to replace his own son? Even though I don't think Lance wants to be there, so maybe if he's able to retire by then, Yuki could take his spot, but I cannot imagine him taking Fernando's spot unless Fernando goes to Mercedes. Who knows? So the D2 here, he's not really a D2 because how could Daniel Ricciardo be a D2? But it's Daniel Ricciardo. He is Australian. He's 33. He's charming. He's charismatic. He's funny. He's cute. He's engaging. He's a great driver. Terrible business sense. and just kind of bad luck. It seems like for a while, Daniel's business plan was just like following Carlos around. Carlos went from Red Bull to Renault, then Daniel moved to Renault. Carlos went from Renault to McLaren. Daniel went from Renault to McLaren. That's where it ended though, because Carlos went to Ferrari and Daniel got fired. I will die on the hill that Daniel did not get bad, but the car and the team was just a really bad fit. And I think Christian would agree with me. I think what's really funny is hearing how Christian talks about hiring Daniel as a reserve driver, because the way he talks about it is like, he's like, I found this poor, malnourished urchin on the streets that was like abused by McLaren. And now I've nursed him back to health, and look at him. He's happy and healthy and vibrant. That's literally how he talks about him. I will also credit Daniel with bringing Formula One to America. I think his presence and Drive to Survive really catapulted Formula One in America. So Daniel basically got fired from McLaren, had no seat, became a reserve driver slash like marketing extraordinaire for Red Bull last year. Halfway through the season, Nick DeVries was not performing. They sent Daniel off to do a test lap. Daniel like crushed it. So they're like, you're our new AlphaTauri driver. So then Daniel came back, drove for like 1.5 races, and then broke his hand. Funnily enough, broke his hand trying to avoid crashing into Oscar Piastri. And what Oscar just keeps messing with Daniel's racing career unintentionally, but like first he gets fired because of Oscar, then he breaks his hand because of Oscar. Can Oscar let this man live? Leave the man alone. Anyway, Daniel was out for like 6 weeks, getting surgery on his finger, I think, metacarpal. And based on Hannah Montana, that is his finger. And once he recovered, he was able to make his return. And it seems like he's a mainstay unless he breaks any other joints. But the biggest thing to watch out for with Daniel in 2024 is that he is very committed to getting the second Red Bull seat from Checo. So the pressure's on Checo. Daniel will be applying that pressure hardcore. Red Bull will be applying that pressure hardcore. And if Checo can't live up to it, there's a very good chance that Daniel will be moving up to Red Bull, because I can't imagine them filling that seat with anyone besides Daniel Ricciardo. And then, of course, if Daniel moves on to Red Bull, then Liam Lawson is free to take the extra RB seat that he tragically lost, and he deserves it. He honestly deserves to be on the grid. Okay, moving on to Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber. We're just like on a roll with the worst possible team names ever. This team was formerly known as Alfa Romeo, a name rich in F1 history and beautiful cars, but that is no more. Audi will come in 2026, and during this interim year, we're known as Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber. But our friends call us Kick Sauber. There's not much I can say about this team because I don't know if this will shift the vibe at all. I can immediately say that it's already uglier than Alfa Romeo because Valtteri and Guan Yu look like Shigo's sidekicks from Kim Possible. It's a lot of neon green and black. Also, something I should look into is whether they're still considered Ferrari's sister team, because I think they still have a Ferrari engine this year, but next year once Audi comes in, they will no longer be in any way associated with Ferrari, which I guess means they're not Ferrari's sister team. Don't know. So the team principal is hard to say. The current managing director is Alessandro Aluni Bravi, who will act as the team rep at races. Andreas Seidel has been brought in as chief executive, which is a part of the general team principal role, but he will not be on track because his responsibilities continue to be transitioning the team to welcome Audi in 2026. And then there's a guy named James Key, who is the technical chief. Both James Key and Andreas Seidel came from McLaren, where they worked together. And then all of these three people seem to collectively perform the role of team principal together. But I guess it's not fully a traditional team principal. And I don't know why every other team can have one team principal, but they need three people. However, Bottas did praise Andreas Seidel's leadership. So I don't know if he's the one who's really in charge and he just really didn't want to be in the limelight. If you remember his time at McLaren. bro's not great with media. So the D1 here is Valtteri Bottas, former Mercedes driver, Finnish, loves the sauna. His girlfriend is Tiffany Cromwell, who is a professional cyclist, like an Olympian cyclist, and she's cool and she's sporty. Mercedes was hell for Valtteri, and now he's at Alfa Romeo where he has more control. He's been here since 2022, and I just like that he has the security of a multi-year contract, control, and leadership in a team, and it just feels like a much happier, safer fit for him. Also important to note, Valtteri's aesthetic is pretty much shaped by his Australian girlfriend, because honestly, you would never guess he's Finnish and Australian, at least on the inside. His personality remains very much Finnish. The man loves a sauna. That's Finnish. He loves a mullet. That's Australian. He will walk around in a bro tank and flip-flops till literally the end of time. Australian. He will occasionally sport the world's worst mustache, Australian, but he's still very Finnish in personality. He's deadpan, he's kind of quiet, but he's funny, but you have to think about it in order to realize he's funny, that sort of thing. He's very sporty. He cycles with Tiffany during any time off he has, and he's often seen swimming naked in various bodies of water. In fact, he has an entire calendar dedicated to his butt in various locations, and I am dying to get my hands on it. The calendar, not the butt. Anyway, the dude's living his best life, and that's all I've ever wanted for him. And just as a disclaimer, for the rest of this year, Brits love coming at me for saying Valtteri Bottas wrong. I say Valtteri Bottas. They say Valtteri Bottas. I can't even say it the way they say it. Both of us are wrong, so I don't know why they're correcting me to say it also wrong. It's Valtteri Bottas, but I'm not going to obviously say that every time. So that's just a fair warning. You might get annoyed with the way I say Valtteri's name. However, on the plus side, it's unlikely I will be mentioning him at all next year. So anyway, D2 is Zhou Guanyu. Guanyu is the first Chinese driver in F1. This will be his 3rd year, and I absolutely love him, specifically his paddock fits. They're just like in a league of their own. They're cool, but they're approachable. Like, he's just got that X factor. The way he puts together an outfit with designer pieces and like regular pieces, the way they sit on him, the way he just exists in these clothes, it's just so natural and so effortlessly cool. Also, he loves boba, and we finally, after long waiting for it, got his boba order. And it was actually just very basic. It's just milk tea with boba, but love that for him. Next up is him getting Valtteri to try boba. Predictions for next year, I feel like we will not hear the words kick Sauber until Audi enters the chat in 2026, honestly. All right, and finally, Haas. They're American. They're sort of a joke. Everyone loved them anyways, mostly because of Gunther Steiner. Unfortunately, Gunther is no longer with us for reasons that are becoming murkier with every passing day. First, it seemed like he was unceremoniously fired by Gene Haas because Gene basically just blamed him for everything. Then after watching Drive to Survive, it almost seemed like he wanted to leave and he just was not happy being 10th all the time, which fair enough. And now there are rumors that he tried to bring a huge sponsor into Haas, but he wanted part of the shares or whatever. And Gene was like, no. So then he left. Whatever it is, it's a huge loss to Haas and to literally all of F1. But Haas literally had this one thing going for them, and that was Gunther Steiner. You could almost say he brought DTS as much as Daniel Ricciardo, just in a much less palatable aesthetic. But personality, for sure. Gunther, I think Drive to Survive people cried when they found out Gunther left. However, we did find out that he got a job as a commentator for a German broadcaster, so I personally will not be seeing or hearing him, but it's nice to know that he's around. And it's also not his fault that they suck. I don't know why Gene Haas is blaming him when really Gene Haas is at blame because he refuses to spend anything on the car. It's basically just like a junkyard car composed of random parts. Anyways, let's talk about the people. First, Gene Haas is the owner. I have nothing to say about him except he's never present, clearly doesn't care. I don't know why he's doing this. The team principal is Ayao Komatsu. The new team principal is an engineer by trade. I believe he has a PhD in automotive engineering, which is very impressive. And when I first read that, I was like, wow, maybe he'll bring change to this team. But then I realized he's been with the team since 2016, so I'm not entirely sure what he's going to bring. But maybe being in a leadership position will give him some sort of power. I don't know what he's planning on doing. Unless he's got some sort of magical charisma hiding that's like the Japanese version of Gunther Steiner. I don't know what he's going to bring to the table, but maybe he'll lead Haas to a Constructors' Championship. Probably not, though. D1 is Kevin Magnussen. Kevin is Danish and he's 31. He's technically a daddy driver since his dad was in F1 and also won Le Mans 4 times. Kevin was a hothead back in the day in like the first couple of seasons. Then he was fired along with Grosjean from Haas at the end of 2020 to make way for fresher blood or blood money because they hired Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin. And then Nikita Mazepin was fired after the war in Ukraine broke out and he was replaced with Kevin Magnussen. Then Mick Schumacher was fired and he was replaced with Nico Hülkenberg, who is German. He is 35. Honestly, last year I had no idea why he was here. Now I see that he's performed rather well as he can for Haas. Basically all I know about him is that he used to be hot and he now looks like someone who used to be hot but is now like way past their prime sort of way. He was a reserve driver for Aston Martin during his time away and he like literally gave no fucks. Like he was late to fill in at one point. Like I think that's when I really fell out with him. But he's performed better than Kevin this year, so maybe he's changed. I'm not sure. Maybe he wasn't the worst choice after all. The most exciting part about Kevin and Nico, and they've like moved past this and that's fine, but whatever. But they had an iconic moment like 7 years ago when they had a fight on track and afterwards they were doing media and Nico comes up to Kevin and tries to shake his hand and Kevin just stares at it. And Nico's like, once again, the most unsupportive driver. And Kevin goes, suck my balls. And it's become iconic. And I know Kevin said that his child has really mellowed him out. But you can be a father and still tell another man to suck your balls. I think that's fine. It's socially acceptable. Okay, so that is it for the 2024 primer episode. My overall predictions, even though I did one for every team, is I think Red Bull will dominate once again, unfortunately. I'm hoping, praying, whatever else I could possibly do, that Charles will break his unlucky streak. I hope Carlos really sticks it to Ferrari, does what he wants, and just dominates in some capacity. But otherwise, I don't really know what to expect. I hope we get something more fun than just Max winning, as lovely as it is to see a man thrive in his profession. I hope we get some fun. And we did have like a wild, silly season to kick off this racing season. And hopefully we keep that energy going as we move forward. Anyways, I will be back this weekend to debrief the first race of the season, the Bahrain Grand Prix. In the meantime, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, comment, review, and share with any potential boxes. And make sure you follow along on social media at BoxBoxF1Pod to keep up in between races. Until then, see you soon. Box.